We are filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archives. We have with us today one of the American icons in jazz, Herbie Hancock.
How you doing, Mike?
Great. I want to just kind of say a few little things, a few little questions, and just kind of let you roll on. You were a prodigy.
That's a funny word. I'm starting to hear people use that more and more now, in reference to me in my early life in music. But I think that way about some other people, but never about myself, you know. I just do what I do. I started when I was 7, but, you know, I think I don't know if that's an average age. It may be an average age. It's probably close to average for starting to learn to play an instrument. I've heard of people starting to play instruments as early as 3, you know. Well, now I guess with the Suzuki method and some other methods, they started 1. Or when they come out of the room, they're starting. You know. But anyway, I seem to be able to catch on to reading fairly quickly when I was young. My first teacher, which her name was Mrs. Whalen, and she taught me for 2.5 years. She was the church organist for the Baptist church, and I took lessons at the 2nd floor of the Baptist church, you know, and that was the church I belonged to at that time. Anyway, she didn't teach me very much about dynamics. So I could only play 1 volume level, and that was fairly loud, you know. But I didn't know anything about playing soft, nothing about touch, nothing about nuances, and nothing about the history of music. I just learned to read what the notes were. You know? And then I got a new teacher, Mrs. Jordan, and I remember sort of. It's not exactly auditioning for her, but she wanted to hear me play something, so she could tell what level I was at. You know? And she said, yeah, you read very well, you know. But she said, but did she teach you anything about dynamics? You know, I said, what? And she said, you know, loud and soft. Anyway, then she played some Chopin. And my eyes bugged out. I said, how do you do that? I want to play like that. Because it was so beautiful the way she was playing. I mean, it was, you know, she had the dynamics, and it was colorful, and it had shape to it. It wasn't just plink, 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 you know. That's what I was playing before. Plink, 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 plink. That's all it was.
So anyway, something had to mesmerize you to draw you into that next level.
Yeah, it was the feeling. That's what did it, the feeling.
Now, tell us about your debut with the symphony.
Well, that was during the time that I was with Mrs. Jordan, the 2nd teacher. You know, by that time, you know, I was playing Bach, inventions, and some fugues and preludes, and some Chopin. Had gotten into etudes and I think maybe Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu, some things like that. So 1950, actually 1950. Is that right? No, 1951. I auditioned for this. Basically, it was a concert, the Young People's Concert Series in Chicago. And what would happen is that you would audition for who was then the assistant conductor of the Chicago Symphony. That was George Schick, who became president of Manhattan School of Music later on, by the way. And anyway, so they would select one person from each instrument of the orchestra who would be a winner, and I happened to win for the piano. And the prize would be to play your concerto with the Chicago Symphony. Anyway, I won. And then, the way I found out that I won was that I received a postcard in the mail about 2 months later. It said, "Congratulations, you've been selected as the piano winner of the Young People's Concert Series. However," by the way, it said the date you are to perform is February 5th, 1952. I think that was it. Yeah. Or 1951. I've forgotten. Yeah, maybe I auditioned in 50 and played in 51. But anyway, anyway, it said, however, the concerto that you auditioned with, somehow we haven't been able to locate the orchestral parts. So you'll either have to learn a new concerto or forfeit the performance. You'll still be winner, but you won't be able to play with the Chicago Symphony. So I had to learn a new concerto, and that other one I knew cold. The new one I had to learn in about 3 months, so I didn't have nearly as much time. And so I made the performance, and as a matter of fact, after the performance, I signed the first autograph that I ever signed, But the next week, I should say that the performance was at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and the next week, my teacher had gotten herself and me tickets to see Myra Hess, who was a very famous classical pianist at the time, who was performing with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So we went that week to see Myra Hess. Guess what she played? The concerto that I auditioned with. So all of that nonsense that they sent about them not being able to find the parts was a bunch of baloney.
Hello.
So,
let me ask you.
My teacher was mad. Oh, I thought she was going to tear that place up. She was so mad. I mean, she said, how could they do that to a little kid,
When did you get started moving into jazz? When did you make the transition? And what was the catalyst for the transition?
It was about 1953 or 54 when I was either 13 or 14 years old. The funny thing is that I had been listening to rhythm and blues before that, and hanging out with the kids my age, of course, and that's what they listened to. That's what I listened to. And I also listened to classical music, too, because my mother wanted to give me, quote, culture. She wanted to make sure her children were, quote, cultured. And what that meant was really European culture, and what it certainly did was give me a pretty well-rounded cultural foundation, so I'm happy about the way things really turned out, because I can use all of that in playing jazz, and then it also gives me the avenue of being involved with classical music, if the desire is there and the opportunity arises. So I've got a whole spectrum of things that are part of my foundation. Anyway, my mother was a very important, the most important influence on me as far as not only support, but being able to move me forward, because I had a tendency to kind of lay back and be a little shy, and she would just push me on out there. I'm glad she did, Anyway, I noticed in high school that the kids that were the most mature acting and the coolest and the most mysterious were the ones that listened to jazz. And I said, I want to be like that. You know, so I started hanging out with them. You hang out with them, they're listening to jazz. You know, so that was one of the things. There was another very important thing too. There was a pianist named Don Goldberg who performed at the variety show that my school used to give every semester. And he had a jazz trio. And he was my age, he was in my class, and I heard him improvising. And I was shocked, first of all. It sounded, I didn't know what he was doing. Because I always used to turn jazz off whenever it was on the radio. Because I didn't understand it, and I didn't want to know anything about it, I didn't care about it, I didn't like it. But when I saw this guy improvising, you know, and it sounded organized to me. I didn't know what he was doing, but it sounded like he knew what he was doing. Then I became fascinated. Because he was doing it on my instrument, and he was my age. I thought you had to be much older to play jazz, you know, like, you know, 19 or something. And, but he was doing it, and so I started hanging out with this guy and asking him, you know, what does he listen to? How does he learn that? How do you do these things? And so at the time, his favorite pianist and the person he tried to emulate was George Shearing. And so I remember going home telling my mother, Mama, you gotta give me some George Shearing records. And she said, son, you have some George Shearing records. I said, no, Mom, you don't understand. I want to get some George Shearing records. I gotta find out how to do this stuff, improvising, you know. She said, Herbie, remember those records I bought for you about 2 years ago? And you got angry with me because you didn't know who it was, and there were some other records you wanted, and you had a tantrum. And I bought you these records for Christmas. I said, yeah. She said, that was George Shearing, and you got those records in your cabinet. And I went in the cabinet, sure enough, they were there. You know, my mother had no idea that was going to be the first jazz artist I would ask about. You know, it just was.
Let me make a quantum there, because I want to hook in on something that you said. You said the kids that you were hanging out with, who were the hippest, the most mature, and the most mysterious. That's what turned you on. So now, from your entrance into jazz to the place where you would be asked to play keyboard with the hippest, most mysterious man in all of jazz. You know we're talking about Miles.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you got to work with Miles and how that liaison came about and some of the dynamics in there.
Okay. I was brought to New York from Chicago by Donald Byrd, you know, another great trumpeter. And Donald really took me under his wing, and we shared an apartment together, so he was my roommate, and he was like really a big brother to me. And he really showed me the ropes in New York, and he really encouraged me in so many ways and taught me a lot of things, and was the person responsible for me doing my very first record as a leader. He's responsible for me getting my own publishing company so that my first tunes were published in my own company and not in the record company's company. Thank goodness for that, because one of the first tunes I wrote was Watermelon Man.
Which is still played today.
Still played today. And he was also responsible for introducing me to Miles Davis. So I owe a lot to Donald Byrd. I mean, so much that I could never repay him for what he's done for me. And
somebody has to give you that hand, don't they? Somebody.
Sometimes not. Sometimes, well, there's always some kind of opportunity, one way or the other. Whether it's someone actually taking you somewhere, or whether a door being open where something is needed, and you happen to be at the right place at the right time. But in very, very many cases, maybe most cases, there is a person that gives you a chance somehow. Sometimes it's a person that gives you inspiration. You never know. That's why, by the way, it's so important to not think of our lives as being trivial and not think of our daily life. Just because we don't have anything doesn't mean that we can't be a great influence on someone who could have a dynamic influence on the rest of humanity.
That is an awesome statement. That's a conversation within itself.
Yeah, so everybody's important.
I'm going to put that one on hold. We're going to come back to that. Jump on Miles.
Okay.
I'm going to keep that reserved. We're going to finish with that because that's a mouthful.
Okay. So Donald had introduced me to Miles in about a year and a half or 2 years prior to my joining Miles's band. But the way I actually got into Miles's band, I had been hearing rumors that Miles was looking for me. And finally, I started hearing so many rumors that I began to believe it. Because, I mean, at first I said, come on, get out of here. Miles Davis calling me? No, forget it. You know, that'll never happen. And, I mean, I had never even dreamed of playing with Miles. That was beyond my fondest dreams. And anyway, so Donald Byrd, again, because he was my roommate, said, if Miles calls you, tell him you're not working with anybody. I said, but Donald, I owe you so much. He said, shut up, man. He said, I would never stand in the way of you having such a great opportunity like that. He says, tell him you're not working with anybody. And it was almost within about an hour. The phone rang, and it was Miles. First question Miles asked was, are you working with anybody? And I looked at Donald and I said, no. And then he invited me to his house the next day at 2:30, I think it was. Click. And he hung up the phone. I didn't know his phone number. You know, fortunately, I knew Donald Byrd knew where he lived, but I started to panic. And then a half hour later, Tony Williams, great drummer, called me. And it turned out that Miles had called him too. And he had Miles's address and everything. So the next day we went to Miles's place, and Miles ushered us into his basement, his rec room there. And Ron Carter, bassist, was there, and George Coleman, tenor saxophonist, he was there, and Tony Williams and myself. And Miles. And Miles didn't pick up his horn. He said, play some of these. He asked, I think, Ron to kind of lead this, what I thought was audition. He says, play some of these tunes. There were some new tunes they were working on, I guess. And then Miles split. He went upstairs somewhere. And so we started playing these tunes. They had music there. This went on for 3 days. And I saw Miles maybe twice in those 3 days. And once Gil Evans and Philly Joe Jones came down. Gil Evans, who did these incredible arrangements of Porgy and Bess and Sketches of Spain,
yeah.
Miles Ahead, a bunch of things. Anyway, and Philly Joe Jones, who was Miles's former drummer, they came down. And by the way, I found out much later that Miles was upstairs in one of his other rooms listening to us play over the intercom. So I think he suspected that if he had been there, we would have felt intimidated. So he wasn't there. He was away, and we didn't even know he was there, so he could really hear what we could do. Anyway, after the third day, he came downstairs and he said, okay, tomorrow we meet at 3:30 at Columbia Studios on 30th Street. And that was a very famous recording studio. I knew that studio, but I'd never recorded there. And I said, I was just shocked. And I said, Miles, does that mean I'm in the band? He said, you're making the record. You know? And then he smiled, you know.
Uh-huh.
And the one statement he made that gave me the most indication that he liked what was going on, because he hadn't said anything yet. Mm-hmm. Nothing complimentary, nothing. At the studio, we walked in there, and then Tio Macero, who was the producer, came into the booth, the recording booth, and Miles said, "Hey, Tio, listen to this." And I could tell by Miles's face, he was just chomping at the bit to show Tio his new band. You know? Mm-hmm. And so we kicked off one of the tunes. I think it was 7 Steps to Heaven, you know. And Tio almost fell off his chair. He couldn't believe it. And because it was a very exciting group, you know. And Tony at the time was 17 years old. So he was talking about a prodigy. That's the prodigy. And he was a real phenomenon. And we played there, and then we recorded the album 7 Steps to Heaven. And the following week, we played our first gig up at Bowdoin College in Maine. And I was there for 5.5 years after that.
Wow. I want to contrast
Excuse me.
something just to and have you talk about the experience. The experience of being ushered into the basement that first day, and then the experience of being the one chosen. I saw the ceremony to give Miles the Lifetime Achievement Award. I saw that. I was touched by that. Tell us about that.
Well, by the time I was able to give Miles the Lifetime Achievement Award from, I guess that was from NARAS, from the Grammy Awards, part of the Grammy Awards ceremony. NARAS is the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. It's the Academy Award for the record industry. Anyway, by that time I had my own career going. I had even done some acting on television. I think I had already had a TV show called Rock School at the time, which came, and we did a couple seasons of that, and then that went. And there was another show I had too, called Coast to Coast. It was on Showtime. I'm not sure whether that was before presenting this award to Miles or not, but anyway, I'm just saying that by then I'd kind of grown up and had my own things going, and had been a presenter several times also for the Grammys. And so I was selected by Mike Green, who's the president of NARAS, and I think he was president at that time. And maybe there was a committee, but I was asked to do that, probably because I had been a former member of Miles's band, and they could trust that I knew how to deliver that, you know.
Uh-huh. You know. It was a touching moment, and not much was said, but there was some electricity there.
Well, I know what Miles means to me personally, and I know what he means to music and what he means to the public at large, and so in giving this Lifetime Achievement to Miles, I wasn't just reading what was on the teleprompter. I mean, I was reading that, but I meant every word that I said, because I had something of my own experience with this man who was like my teacher, like my father in a way, you know, as far as my career is concerned. You know. I learned so much from Miles that I would be a very different piano player had it not been for that experience in playing with that particular Miles Davis group, you know, because of Miles and because of all the sidemen. But one of the things that Miles provided among many things is the attitude to really encourage an individual to develop his creativity, you know, and he was very concerned about young people. He hired a very young band, and he wanted us to figure things out ourselves. He wanted us to continually work on things. I mean, he even said, "I pay you to practice on the bandstand, on the stage, in front of the people, not just in your room." You know, the idea was not just to go to your room and practice something and learn it perfectly and then play it in front of the people. Miles wanted true jazz improvisation to be presented by this band, which means you capture that moment, not the moment in your room hours earlier. And so that's a lesson I've never forgotten, and it sustains me to this day.
Yeah, I want to come in on one other thing. You know, some people believe that the piano duets that you've done with Chick basically took pianistic virtuosity in terms of improvisation to its zenith. And some people said it hasn't gone past that since.
Wow.
Talk to us about the two of you like spurring each other on, learning from each other, just like I said, just the virtuosity of the language,
Yeah, Chick and I should tell you about when we first got together to do the first tour. When we first got together to rehearse, neither one of us had done anything quite like that before. He had done some duets, I guess, with his then girlfriend, now wife, Gail Moran, who was working in his band, and she's also a singer. But that was sort of a different story because she hadn't had the same kinds of experiences. She wasn't like a heavyweight piano player per se, and that wasn't what she was about. Chick had two pianos in his house, and two big Steinways, I guess they were, maybe a Berzendorfer and a Steinway concert grands, and which was fortunate. That we didn't have to pay for a rehearsal studio, and we didn't have to rent pianos. It was great, and then we could just take our time and just feel really relaxed. But I was a little nervous about it, and Chick was a little nervous about it too, because we both really respected each other. We're both contemporaries. And so we decided to take a tune. I don't remember which tune it was. But we were both so cautious in the beginning. But it was funny to notice that became easy. So then we would each start to take a few more chances, and that became easy. And then we started being less and less polite. Because at first we were so polite, I would play something and I would wait to hear what Chick was going to play and really try to follow him, and leave him a lot of space, and he'd leave me space. It got to the point where we didn't have to leave each other any space. We could just both play simultaneously, and it didn't even conflict. So we said, well, looks like this is going to be a lot easier than we thought. It just happens that Chick and I just really fit each other. Somehow it just works. It's amazing, It's really amazing. I've had the great fortune also to play 5 concerts opposite Oscar Peterson, but we played a couple of things together. So that was a great opportunity for me. He's one of the people that was a major influence on me when I was coming up. That's a little more difficult playing with Oscar. Maybe because he has been his own man for so long, he's used to doing certain kinds of things, and this is pretty far removed from what he's accustomed to. But still, we were able to find a common ground and get something going, But with Chick, it's like, it's effortless. I don't even have to think about him being, about providing a space for him. So it was really fantastic, and you're right. We would feed each other constantly. I've got some stories I could tell you about some funny concerts. one time during the tour, it became so easy to play together that we started trying to find other devices to use to kind of just a combination of either like throwing a monkey wrench into the works just to give us something to deal with.
Just to make a save?
Yeah, exactly. And so we started getting into playing inside the piano, doing things like that, combination of the two, and different effects, and then hitting. Then we started hitting the sounding board and hitting the metal parts, the harp of the piano, using that for rhythm. And I remember one concert, I think it was in Hamburg. We played the concert, and the next morning, the newspaper comes out, and there's a picture of Chick and I. Chick was in the piano, knees and everything. I mean, he had crawled into the piano. I was under the piano, on my back, banging on the sounding board, and we were actually, things would just go that far. We were making music with rhythm, using other parts of the piano. I mean, it was amazing. We would use physical gestures sometimes. We get into where we were playing things, and I'd do this, and then he would do this, or then he would do this, and then there were eye movements, up and down, and that became part of it. Different things, and then we play. And then he would do, but we would make it as though we're music. We'd make some kind of pattern or organized patterns out of it, and integrate those kind of body movements with the notes that we were playing, and it made some sense. Once we played at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And this was incredible. We got so many standing ovations. It was amazing. It got to the point where by the either fourth or fifth standing ovation, we decided not to even go to the pianos. So I took a chair, set it down in the middle of the stage. Chick sat in the chair, and I sat next to him. And we, for the last final encore, we never even touched the pianos. We were making sounds with our mouth, and doing things with gestures and all kinds of things. And the people went crazy. They loved it. And because we had kind of gotten them to that. They were along for the trip, and it really worked. It was a great thing to experience for me, And we wound up actually doing 2 tours. One was in '76. I think the other one was in 1978. So we had a great time together. Then we actually did a short tour in Brazil, and I've forgotten what year that was. Brazil and some other parts of South America in the 80s.
I got one final question because I realize we got to let you go because you got to perform tonight.
Right.
Just talk to us a little bit. Feedback, concepts, insights on your being one of the icons and one of the spearheads of the whole electronic revolution. And it's the ways and types it either bonds with jazz or dissects jazz or is jazz.
I started playing piano when I was 7. Well, when I was 5, I was already building model boats and planes and taking apart things like watches. And I was always curious about how things worked. I'm the same way with people. People fascinate me. I'm always, asking them, questions and trying to find out what makes them tick. And so I've always had this kind of interest in science. As a matter of fact, when I was in college, my first major was electrical engineering before I switched to music composition. And so when synthesizers came along, it fulfilled something for my life that I never dreamed would be possible. And that is to combine science and music in some kind of way. So I naturally gravitated toward that because I've always been interested in technology. And I've always been interested in orchestration too. So a synthesizer to me is a tool for making instruments. It doesn't have any sound until you program something into it. You know, so it's like the hammer and the nails, you know, and the wood. You have to have that, and then you can make an instrument. And so I can use it as a kind of an orchestration tool. But then, since then, there have been other technologies involving computers and sequencing, and MIDI came along. And MIDI is a way for, I know this is funny because I was around with fooling with electronics and music before MIDI came along. MIDI means musical instrument digital interface. What I noticed that if I have an album, I think it's the Sunlight album. On the back of this album, all of these keyboards, I mean, full of keyboards. And there's no way I can get around to all those keyboards. So I remember telling instrument manufacturers, why don't you guys figure out a way to get these instruments to talk to each other so that, I mean, a person only has two hands, and I can hear that I'd like this to happen and that to happen, but I can't get to them all. But if you could get a way, figure out an electronic way for the instruments to talk to each other, then I could play one instrument and it could actually trigger the sounds on other instruments. So that, anyway, that, I guess enough people started talking about that, they took it seriously, and they actually formed an alliance which allowed them to make certain standards and make a protocol called MIDI. And that led to some other ideas that we never even thought of, that you could start making keyboards that didn't have keys, just modules, you know? And, well, they don't call them keyboards. Sometimes I do. I'll still call it a keyboard, even though it doesn't have keys, you know? But I've got a rack with about, it has other things in it too, but it's got about 5 or 6 different, like keyboards and modular instruments that can be talked to from another single keyboard. And it gives me the opportunity to like I said, arrange. And also sequencers, which came out of music and computer technology, give me a chance to, maybe I should explain what that is.
Rupert.
Oh, okay. 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 So this sequencer remembers the notes that I play, and it's stored in the computer, and then it can play back those same the same code that contains the notes, and play it back through the instruments, so that I can listen back to what I played, you know, on the very instrument that I played it on, you know. So the computer plays it the second time if I put it in a playback mode. And now we can have different tracks. Now they have multi-track recording on your computer. Tapeless recording, you know, where the instrument gets put into your hard disk. And so this has opened up all kinds of new possibilities for recording in your home. I mean, all these parallels are happening also in business, in the business world too. You know, a lot of people are now able to work at home and have computer terminals at home, and have them connected through a modem or other device to the office machines. And so it just kind of expands this idea of virtual office. You know, same thing, it's like a virtual studio, you know. now that idea of virtual studio is really taking shape, because now it's possible, although this technology is very new, to be able to overdub on a recording and not be in the city that's recording it. It's remote recording, where you can have a recording session in New York. Excuse me. Musicians can lay down certain tracks, and if, say, they wanted me to overdub a part on that recording, on a different track, I can be in Los Angeles, listen to the tracks that have been recorded on, and through a high-speed telephone linkage, and record from my studio back through the phone onto the tape that's in New York.
Wow.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have a setup in my studio now that allows me to do something like that. It just got set up just before I came to. No, it's not even set up yet. It was brought to the studio before I came to New York. You know, so I haven't had a chance to use it there. We did use the same device actually last night at the Blue Note. Dolby has this device called Dolby Fax Pro, and it allows you to send music, high quality sound down a telephone line. That's a higher speed line than the regular telephone line. It's called an ISDN line. But it's not very expensive, those ISDN lines. And they allow you to really go more than put more than your toe into the world of the new world of technology, into the start getting into the information highway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I should tell you that I'm launching a foundation.
Tell us about that.
And the idea of the foundation, the overview pertains to technology for humanity. Because I've noticed that the world of technology is going through the roof. It's amazing, the things that are possible, and the importance that technology is going to play in education, in entertainment, and they coined this word edutainment. You know, it makes education fun. You know, and communications, and also in the workplace for business teleconferencing, for home entertainment, television, telephone. I mean, all these things are going to be all really linked up together in the very near future.
What will foundation
But
be
I
called?
look at, I'm sorry?
What will it be called?
Foundation is called the Rhythm of Life Foundation. And I look at programs like CNN and other news programs, and I see what's happening to humanity, and humanity's in pretty bad shape, you know. And so I'm thinking something's wrong with this picture. If the measure of the value of something, I mean, isn't it supposed to be what it does for humanity? Should be that anyway. Then what is technology doing for humanity? If humanity's in the toilet and technology is going through the roof. So there is something wrong with that picture. So I think there needs to be a lot more balance between the typical approach to technology, which is to look at machines first, mm-hmm. and figure out what kind of tools can we make from these machines. Then take those tools to human being and say, how can you use these? The human being says, oh, I can use it for this or for that. Meanwhile, the real issues that are the real problems for human beings, which have to do with the fact that responsibility, which is something that's part of the fiber of life, you know, that's almost totally lacking in society today, you know, and across the board with the adults and with our young people. Sense of responsibility and things like courage, self-worth, mutual respect, you name it. So many of these things need to be nurtured, need to be encouraged, and even the decision-making process. You know, this idea of having a very short view of life needs to be re-examined and changed, so we have a much longer view, so we can have a sense of the results of what the results of our actions can lead to. You know, promoting that kind of follow-through and thinking about your life. So anyway, what this foundation wants to do is to propose that the technological community spend at least some kind of balance of time looking at humanity first and saying, how can I use technology to address the needs of humanity and develop software and ideas from that standpoint.
And I can also see how your music would be at the spearhead of that. Listen, we've got to let you go because you've got to play tonight.
Right.
This has been wonderful. Monk, can I put a plug in here and say, could we do round 2 sometime? Because he's not even started. He's not even warmed up yet. But we're filming for Hamilton College Jazz Archives. We have been with one of the icons of this country in music, Herbie Hancock. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.